Hello and welcome to our bonus content for our October 19th, 2022 Reserve Studies Q&A webinar program. We had so many questions that we had an overflow of questions that we could answer during the actual webinar. So we've recorded this bonus content. We've got this one and I believe 7 others that we'll be shooting to help answer your questions to help you have success at your association. This is the general reserve study questions, and I'll jump right into it. So, how often should your HOA have a reserve study done? Well, basically, best practice is a with-site visit update every 3rd year, plus or supplemented by very inexpensive no-site visit updates in the in-between years. And before I get on to the next question, let me just add that that level of updating is very appropriate for a budget line item that's often one of your largest, and certainly it's 15 to 40% of your total annual budget. Okay, what adjustments can a board of directors request to have made to a reserve study based on their knowledge and understanding of future work that needs to be completed? Well, that's a great question. The answer is discuss with your reserve study provider to incorporate that information into your reserve study, or use a tool like our UPlanet online reserve calculator to tweak that information and give you your local knowledge control. But we like to get information from the board of directors or the managers to incorporate into the reserve study. We believe actual information from the association is just incredibly valuable. Our reserve study is done in August, so we know the contribution when the budget is done in October. But August through December, we're doing component projects, and the actual costs are better known then. What do? Okay, well, discuss with your reserve study provider, and very likely they'll provide an update or a revision to your reserve study at that last minute in maybe November or December. Do the members need to be verified when money is taken out of the reserve account for any reserved item already listed in the reserve study previously? Do the members need to be maybe asked, or do they need to approve the transfer? The answer is generally no. Spending reserves for care of the property is fundamentally the job of the reserve study and the job of the board. But some governing documents are a little odd or different in that manner. So check with your association attorney first on this subject. Okay, how do you actually use the reserve study when planning your budget? That's a great question. Reserve study is primarily a disclosure and budget tool, so that's its primary purpose, disclosing the current condition of your reserve components, disclosing the current condition of your reserve fund, and making a recommendation for how much you need to be setting aside to take care of your projects there at the association. So you do that in advance of the budget preparation process at your association, so you can see the reserve funding recommendation and incorporate that into your annual budget. Is there a standard format for reserve studies, or does each company develop and use its own? Well, there's national standard requirements, and so every company should meet those national standard requirements, certain disclosures, certain basic tabular information that needs to be incorporated, but each company generally has their unique format that they feel best suits the way they communicate to clients. Should a reserve study be updated every year? Absolutely. It's, again, one of your largest budget line items. It deserves to be reviewed and adjusted on an annual basis. How can we ensure that the reserve study will provide the details needed on a potential budget needs for our specific neighborhood and the primary concerns of our residents? Many in the neighborhood are wary of spending a sizable amount of funds on a reserve study, as we are a very small neighborhood and our dues are low at this point. There's a few trigger concerns that I read in this. How can we ensure that the reserve study will provide the details needed? Well, number one, get a credentialed reserve study provider, someone who has an RS or PRA behind their name. That's Reserve Specialist or Professional Reserve Analyst. Many in the neighborhood are wary of spending a sizable amount of funds on a reserve study as we're small and we don't have much money. Number one, a reserve study, however I said number one, a reserve study is commonly less expensive than you expect or fear. Only the first reserve study that you have will be the most expensive. All the others are update reserve studies and significantly less. And without a reserve study, you are dooming yourself to being surprised. So get a reserve study, find out what the expenses are at the association, and put time on your side to help prepare. Otherwise, you are dooming yourself to being surprised and not having your assessments set as they should be. The danger is not raising your monthly assessments. The danger is not being prepared for the major projects that happen at your association and being prepared to take care of the property. You should not be surprised by expenses that fundamentally are not surprising. Okay, some residents are claiming that we can claim an exemption because our current dues and budget are very low and we can estimate costs on our own. Others feel that the dues are too low to care for reserve funds. Wow, is this person typing all the time during our webinar? Others feel the dues are too low to care for future reserve funds we may need for things like drainage, street, sidewalk, etc. So not having a reserve study done prevents us from adequately understanding what future costs might be. Is it appropriate for a small association like ours to try to estimate costs on their own without a reserve study? Let me stop right there. There's more. A board's job is to make decisions and direct the association forward. A board's job is not to do everything and be everything. So whether your association is large or small, board of directors is the decision makers, the leaders of the association. So don't think that you have to paint the property by yourself, that you have to redo the asphalt by yourself, replant the vegetation by yourself, do the reserve study by yourself. There are professionals who do that cost effectively, and take on the liability for making those projections. So hire a reserve study professional. I wrote some notes here. Actually, here's an idea. Once you have a professionally prepared reserve study, you can use some software like our UPlanet tool. That's $149 a year, very inexpensive, to do the minor annual updates yourselves. It's very easy once the data is already there. What's a liability for a board if the reserve study is not done? Basically, if you choose, that's part of the business judgment rule. I think we covered that I know we covered that in other webinars, that you are responsible to have a duty of care, duty of loyalty, and a duty of inquiry. If you don't know the answer to a question and don't pursue an answer to that question, you incur liability. So, again, you're not supposed to do everything on your own or know all the answers on your own. So get a reserve study. It's as easy as clicking on the Request a Proposal link on our top right of our website, reservestudy.com. I think you'll be surprised how inexpensive a reserve study actually is for your association. And that way it takes the liability off of your shoulders. We show you the path forward, and it should not be a problem at that point in time. Our state standards call for a full reserve study every 5 years, which has been our practice. What would be rationale for doing an update prior to the 5-year mark? Well, quick answer to that is national best practice is to have a with-site visit reserve study update every 3rd year. That's because when you wait 5 years, you have a higher exposure to special assessments, a measurably higher exposure to special assessments. You can imagine that even looking back over the past 3 years, we've had the pandemic, we've had supply chain problems which have driven inflation very high. If you have a reserve study that's even 3 years old, the numbers, the expenses are going to be way out of date. They're going to be inappropriate. So you need to be updating your reserve study more frequently than every 5 years if you want to have a good expectation of any accuracy. Basically, when we update a reserve study every 5th year, it's a rescue project. When we update a reserve study every 3rd year, it's something we call an adjustment. When we update a reserve study annually, which is a significant fraction of our clients, I think 56% of our clients we update annually. Those are minor tweaks. That's what you want for your largest budget line item, not something that requires a rescue. This question pertains to the need for an on-site visit by a reserve study provider. My HOA had an initial reserve study performed by a qualified performer provider 2.5 years ago, where the performer did make an on-site visit. The quality of the reserve study was and is considered satisfactory given the data available at the time for the performer. The HOA is now planning to initiate a follow-up reserve study within 2 years. Okay, that's a little long. I would have thought now would be better. Again, the 3-year mark. The selection of the reserve study performer will be competitive, and there's no assurance that the performer of the initial study will be selected to perform this follow-on study. Should the association plan for an on-site visit by the selected performer? Yes. If the performer is different, if the performer is different than the original performer, well, yes, either way. After 3 years, you want another with-site visit. You want someone on site, whether it's the same provider or a different provider. Either way, the association is compiling a list of changes in assumptions and data based on the original reserve study was performed on. Fantastic. Yeah, compile that information. We recommend our clients compile a reserve file, whether that's physical or electronic, something that keeps a record of all the projects that have been done at your association over the years since the last reserve study. So when we ask, when was the fence painted? How much did it cost? Who painted it? What quality of paint did they use? It's in the file. That's just great information to have. And again, count on best practice being a reserve study update with site visit every 3rd year. I heard about your Client Center and your uPlanet software and that we could utilize it to run additional what-if scenarios on our own. You're right. I would like to understand how to access the Client Center and use the software. Well, the Client Center is, for clients. When we complete a reserve study, we post it online. Clients get to it by going to our website, reservestudy.com, and clicking on the Client Center link, which is at the top right of our home screen. It's very easy to get to it. The primary contact, meaning the person that we interface with to run the reserve study or to perform the reserve study, that person has access to the Client Center and anyone else who they designate. They can, the primary contact can add people as additional users to the Client Center. All those people, well, we have 2 user levels, privileged users and view-only users. The privileged users, which are like board members and committee members, they all have access to uPlanet. You don't want view-only users on uPlanet. You don't want them messing up the adjustments that the board has made to their uPlanet tool, customizing it to the association. So if you're the primary contact that we've been working with to finish the reserve study, literally when we give you the email notification that your reserve study is done, we'll have a link to it, or you can just go to our website, top right corner, Client Center, click on that, log in, and your completed reserve study and your access to uPlanet is right there. And that brings me to the end of our general reserve study questions. Make sure you tune in for our bonus content on components, funding plan, insurance and investments, inflation, legislation, and miscellaneous questions. So thank you very much for a few minutes of your time. I hope this has been helpful. And we want to make sure that you are empowered to have success and an improved future at your association. Here at Association Reserves, we're trying to help you. Take care.